My fiancé vanished 2 years before our wedding. When he returned, he never expected my secret pregnancy to ignite a reckoning. I never believed in love at first sight until the moment our shopping carts collided at Wilson's Market. The sound of metal crashing against metal drew annoyed glances from other shoppers, but all I could focus on were the piercing blue eyes staring back at me. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice deeper than I expected, his brows furrowed with genuine concern as Granny Smith apples rolled in every direction across the polished floor. I knelt to gather them, embarrassed by the commotion we'd caused. "It's fine, really," I mumbled, watching a particularly ambitious apple roll beneath the oranges display. Those were probably bruised already anyway. He crouched beside me, designer shoes incongruous against the linoleum, and reached for the same apple I was targeting. Our hands brushed, and I felt a jolt that had nothing to do with static electricity. "I'm Tyler," he offered with a smile that transformed his serious face, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "Most people call me Ty." "Ashley," I replied, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Friends call me Ash." He examined one of the fallen apples with surprising interest. "Granny Smith's? Making a pie? Tart, actually. They hold their shape better when baked." The words tumbled out before I could stop myself. Most men's eyes glazed over when I talked about cooking techniques. "My mom swore by pink ladies for her tarts," he countered, standing with several rescued apples. "The sweetness balances the tartness better." I rose too, surprised. "Your mom's a chef?" A shadow crossed his face. "Was. She passed last year." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. He nodded, then glanced at my nearly empty cart. "Starving chef or struggling chef?" he asked, noting my careful selections in small quantities. "Both," I admitted. "Sous chef by day, experimental recipe tester by night, budget-conscious shopper always." Tyler's laugh was unexpectedly warm. "Well, the least I can do is replace these casualties." Before I could protest, he'd selected new apples, checking each one with the attention of someone who understood that ingredients matter. We continued shopping together, an unplanned joint venture that felt strangely comfortable. Tyler revealed he'd recently returned home to help with his father's construction business, despite having his own architecture degree. I shared my dream of opening a small restaurant someday, surprised when he asked thoughtful questions, instead of offering empty encouragement. At the register, he insisted on paying for my apples on one condition. That dimple appearing again, he added, "I get to taste the final product." I found myself writing my number on his receipt before I could overthink it. Walking to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened beneath those harsh fluorescent lights. 3 days passed without a word from Tyler. I checked my phone embarrassingly often, eventually convincing myself I'd misread our connection. Maybe he collected numbers from naive women in grocery stores regularly. I tried focusing on the new sauce recipe I was developing, but thoughts of blue eyes and unexpected dimples kept intruding. On the third evening, while I was elbow-deep in bread dough, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this the apple tart genius?" His voice carried a smile. "The very same," I replied, trying to sound casual while my heart raced. "I was beginning to think you'd lost my number." "Never," Tyler said. "Dad's business hit a crisis. I've been in emergency meetings since Tuesday morning." He paused. "But I thought about you a lot." What started as an explanation turned into a 2-hour conversation. Tyler described his father's construction company's financial troubles with surprising candor, his voice growing tired when he explained the pressure of family expectations. When he asked about my day, I found myself sharing not just surface details but my genuine frustrations about the restaurant where I worked, and my detailed dreams for my own place someday. "Not some fancy place," I explained, stretching the phone cord as I moved around my tiny kitchen. "Just good food, made with love, where people feel at home. Like your apartment feels," Tyler observed, somehow sensing the atmosphere through the phone. "Comfortable. Real." That comment stayed with me long after we hung up, his promise to see me that weekend warming my too-quiet apartment. Our first official date happened at the farmer's market, early enough that the morning light cast everything in gold. Tyler arrived with 2 coffee cups, handing me one made exactly how I preferred it. "You remembered," I said, surprised. "Medium roast, splash of cream, no sugar," he recited with a small bow. Then he pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. "For your recipes," he explained, almost shyly. "You mentioned not having a good place to keep them organized." The thoughtfulness of the gesture, remembering a passing comment from our phone conversation, caught me off guard. We spent hours browsing stalls, Tyler asking vendors detailed questions about their produce that revealed his genuine interest in my world. At a jam stall, the elderly woman behind the table smiled knowingly at us. "On you two make a lovely couple," she said, pressing an extra jar of blackberry preserves into my hands. "And a house, honey. Nothing better than young love." Neither of us corrected her assumption. Instead, Tyler's hand found mine as we continued through the market, his thumb occasionally brushing across my knuckles in a way that made it difficult to focus on the heirloom tomatoes I was supposedly examining. Over the following weeks, I discovered the contrasting worlds within Tyler, the business professional who took urgent calls from his father, wore crisp button-downs, and spoke in careful, measured tones. But when that same man read poetry from a dog-eared collection while we picnicked in the park, his voice took on a different quality entirely. Soft, vulnerable, alive with meaning. I fell for his unexpected laughter, the way it would burst forth when genuinely amused, completely transforming his serious face. I fell for how he asked questions about my passions, remembering small details weeks later. Most tellingly, I fell for the way he never checked his phone when we spoke, giving me the rarest gift in modern life, his complete attention. what I couldn't see behind his attentive gaze, was his father's disapproval brewing across town. While Tyler and I created our own world of shared laughter and intertwined fingers, Robert Mitchell sat in his imposing office, reviewing his son's recent activities with cold calculation. Unknown to me, the senior Mitchell had assigned someone to track his son's activities after noticing Tyler's sudden unavailability for networking opportunities with daughters of business associates. The report on his desk included photos of us at the farmer's market, details about my modest apartment, and my unimpressive financial status. Robert Mitchell didn't see how his son's eyes lit up when I spoke, or how we could talk for hours about everything and nothing. He couldn't measure the way Tyler relaxed in my presence, shoulders losing their perpetual tension. All he saw were dollar signs, or their absence, when measuring my worth against the happiness I brought his son. As I fell asleep that night, thinking of Tyler's promised call in the morning, I had no idea that across town, father and son were having the first of many confrontations about me. I couldn't know that Robert Mitchell had already decided I was a distraction to be eliminated, or that Tyler was discovering a backbone he hadn't known he possessed. All I knew was that for the first time in years I felt seen, and that was worth everything that would come after. 1 week after our farmer's market date, rain pounded against the restaurant windows during the Wednesday lunch rush. I was plating an order when Jenny from the front called back, "Ashley, someone's asking for you." My boss raised an eyebrow as I wiped my hands on my apron. 5 minutes, he warned, checking his watch pointedly. I wasn't prepared for the sight that greeted me. Tyler stood by the hostess stand, completely drenched, water dripping from his dark hair onto the polished floor. In his hand was a single yellow daisy, its petals miraculously intact despite the downpour. "Sorry to ambush you at work," he said, droplets sliding down his face. "I was in the neighborhood for a meeting." I learned later the neighborhood meeting was 20 minutes in the opposite direction from his office. "You remembered," I said softly, taking the daisy. 3 nights earlier during a late-night phone call, I'd mentioned my grandmother's garden and how yellow daisies were the only flowers that thrived under her care. Tyler reached into his pocket, pulling out a business card, now spotted with rain. "Mitchell Construction and Development," it read, with Tyler Mitchell, Assistant Director of Operations, beneath it. The cardstock was heavy, expensive, nothing like the flimsy ones the restaurant ordered in bulk. On the back, in surprisingly neat handwriting, "Dinner at my place, Friday, 7 p.m., followed by an address and a small drawing of what appeared to be a spoon. "I can't promise gourmet," he said, that dimple appearing as he smiled, "but I've been practicing." The restaurant door opened behind him, sending in another gust of rain. Tyler glanced at his watch. "I should let you get back. Just wanted to deliver the invitation in person." Before he turned to leave, I caught his hand. "Yes," I said simply. His smile was worth my boss's irritation when I returned to the kitchen, yellow daisy tucked safely in my apron pocket. Friday evening found me standing before an imposing downtown apartment building, second-guessing my outfit choice. The doorman nodded when I mentioned Tyler's name, directing me to the 11th floor. With each floor the elevator climbed, my anxiety grew. Tyler's rain-spotted business card had revealed a side of his life I hadn't fully appreciated, a world of executive titles and downtown addresses. When Tyler opened his door, the apartment behind him wasn't the sleek minimalist space I'd imagined. Books overflowed from mismatched shelves, a worn leather couch faced large windows with a stunning city view, and something was definitely burning in the kitchen. "Welcome to the real me," Tyler said, ushering me in as he dashed toward the smoke detector's warning beep. I followed him into a kitchen, where a smoking pan held what might have once been grilled cheese. "Attempt number 3, he admitted, scraping the blackened sandwich into the trash. "Turns out, cooking is harder than my mother made it look." "Here," I said, removing my jacket, "let me help." Tyler looked genuinely relieved as I took over, finding my way around his kitchen with surprising ease. Soon we sat at his small table, enjoying properly made grilled cheese with tomato soup he'd proudly made from scratch. "Only took 4 attempts, he confessed between bites. The first batch could have been classified as a weapon. After dinner, Tyler gave me a tour of his space. Unlike the Mitchell Construction website I'd secretly Googled, all glass, steel, and corporate precision, Tyler's home felt lived in and thoughtfully arranged. Framed photographs lined one wall, not of people but architectural details from around the city. Wrought iron balconies, Art Deco cornices, century-old brickwork. "You took these?" I asked, noticing the careful composition. Tyler nodded. "Architecture was my first love. Dad calls it my expensive hobby." There was a weight to those words, a story untold. A crack of thunder shook the windows, and seconds later, the apartment plunged into darkness. Perfect timing. Tyler's voice came through the blackness, followed by the scratch of a match. Soon, candles illuminated the space with gentle flickering light. "You keep candles for emergencies?" I asked, settling onto his couch as the storm intensified outside. "For aesthetic purposes, not emergencies," he corrected with a soft laugh, pouring wine by candlelight. "Dad would say it's impractical. Image management starts at home," according to Robert Mitchell. The bitterness in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. As lightning illuminated the room in brief flashes, Tyler pointed to a single framed photograph on his desk, a woman with his same blue eyes, laughing by a lake. "Your mother?" I asked gently. Tyler nodded, swirling his wine thoughtfully. "The only person who ever stood up to my father. She kept his ambition grounded, reminded him why they started the company, to build communities, not just make money." As the storm raged outside, Tyler revealed more about growing up as Robert Mitchell's son, the expectations, the carefully curated public image, the distinction between Mitchell appearances and Mitchell realities. After Mom died, the business became Dad's entire focus, his refuge from grief, I think, Tyler explained. But it also changed, less about community, more about expansion and profit. I could see the conflict in his eyes as he spoke, loyalty to his father battling his own different vision. I stay because it's what Mom would have wanted, he admitted. She believed we could do good things through the business, but sometimes I wonder if she'd even recognize what it's become. The vulnerability in his expression made my heart ache. When the power remained out, and the storm showed no signs of relenting, we built a nest of blankets near the window, watching lightning illuminate the city below. Our conversation deepened with each passing hour, the darkness somehow making it easier to share truths normally kept hidden. As dawn approached and the storm finally subsided, Tyler's confession came quietly. I've never brought anyone from my personal life to company events. It's easier keeping worlds separate. He turned to face me, eyes serious in the fading candlelight. But I want to bring you, Ash. I'm tired of compartmentalizing my life. When he kissed me, it wasn't the tentative first kiss I'd imagined. It carried question and answer simultaneously, a promise of complexity ahead, but a willingness to navigate it together. The rain-soaked business card became the first of many bridges between our worlds. Tyler began appearing at the restaurant during my breaks, always with a yellow daisy, often with some small offering, a cookbook he'd found, an unusual spice he thought I might enjoy experimenting with. My coworkers quickly warmed to him, especially after he fixed the perpetually jammed back door without being asked. He's different with you, my friend Zoe observed one afternoon after Tyler left. Like he can breathe properly. He was right. The Tyler who appeared in business settings, I'd Googled enough to see photos from charity galas and groundbreaking ceremonies, stood straight-backed and serious, a perfect reflection of Robert Mitchell beside him. But my Tyler laughed easily, quoted poetry at inappropriate moments, and once spent an entire evening helping me test 7 different versions of the same sauce without a single complaint. With each yellow daisy and fixed appliance, with each late-night call and shared meal, the space between our worlds narrowed. What I didn't yet understand was how fiercely Robert Mitchell would fight to widen it again. As spring turned to summer, our relationship developed a rhythm neither of us had anticipated. My late shifts at the restaurant and Tyler's long hours at Mitchell Construction meant we often couldn't meet until after 10 at night. Rather than seeing this as an obstacle, we turned these late hours into something sacred. My apartment building had a small rooftop access. Nothing fancy, just a flat surface with a half wall and ancient lawn chairs I'd covered with weatherproof cushions. On clear nights, we'd sit under the stars with mismatched mugs of tea or wine, talking until the city below quieted and the sky began to lighten. Did you always want to go into construction? I asked during one such midnight conversation, tucking my feet under Tyler's leg to keep them warm in the night breeze. His laugh carried a hint of resignation. Not even close. I wanted to design playgrounds. The answer surprised me. Not just any playgrounds. Tyler's eyes lit up with unexpected passion. Inclusive spaces where disabled kids could play alongside everyone else. Where the equipment itself taught scientific principles. Where communities could gather and actually connect. He traced patterns on my arm as he spoke. I had sketchbooks full of designs by 13. What happened to the sketchbooks? Dad happened. His voice softened. He called it a nice hobby but not a career for a Mitchell. The family legacy was in commercial development, not glorified parks. We sat with that for a moment, city lights twinkling below us like grounded stars. Show me, I whispered. Tyler looked confused. Show you what? Your playground. Design it for me right now. He hesitated before his hands began to move, sketching invisible lines in the air between us. As the night deepened, Tyler described ramps integrated so naturally children wouldn't realize they were accessibility features, sensory walls for autism spectrum kids, structures that taught physics through play. His voice grew increasingly animated, hands gesturing expressively in a way they never did when he discussed Mitchell construction projects. Dawn broke as we were still talking, painting the sky in watercolor hues. Tyler checked his watch reluctantly. Another early meeting with his father awaited. I should go, he said, though he made no move to leave. You should, I agreed, equally stationary. When he finally stood to depart, Tyler cupped my face gently. Another day closer to forever, he whispered, kissing me softly before disappearing down the stairwell. It became his signature goodbye, spoken sometimes playfully, sometimes seriously, but always with a reverence that made my heart skip. Another day closer to forever, a promise wrapped in 8 simple words. 3 weeks later, Tyler arrived at my door well after midnight, clutching a weathered wooden box, his expression oddly nervous as he placed it on my kitchen counter. These were Mom's, he explained, opening the hinged lid to reveal dozens of handwritten recipe cards, edges worn from frequent handling. I want you to have them. I stood frozen, understanding the significance. These cards were his most tangible connection to his mother. Tyler, I can't. She would have wanted you to have them, he interrupted gently. More importantly, I want you to have them. We spent that night spreading the cards across my floor. Tyler sharing stories behind each recipe, the chocolate cake made for every birthday, the chicken soup that appeared magically whenever he felt sick, and an elegant script, an apple tart with notes about which apples worked best. She would have loved you, Ash, Tyler whispered as I carefully examined the card. You have her same spark, that refusal to see cooking as just fuel, her understanding that food is really about connecting people. We fell asleep on my living room floor, recipe cards scattered around us like autumn leaves. I woke to find Tyler had carefully organized them alphabetically, and left a note propped against my coffee maker. Building our future cookbook, one midnight at a time. As summer faded, our midnight conversations deepened, but so did the tension between Tyler and his father. 6 months into our relationship, Tyler arrived on my doorstep with shadows under his eyes and frustration radiating from his posture. "He's getting creative," Tyler said without preamble, pacing my small living room. "Suddenly there are emergency client meetings whenever we have plans." Yesterday, he left the society page open on my desk, an article about the Henderson family's daughter returning from Europe. Apparently she's single, and her father owns half the commercial real estate downtown. I tried to hide my hurt, but Tyler saw through it immediately. He knelt before me, taking my hands in his. "Hey," he said, turning my face toward his, "I don't care who her father is or what my father wants. I'm in love with you." The declaration hung in the air between us, the first time either of us had spoken those words aloud. "Ashley Mitchell has a pretty nice ring to it, don't you think?" he added, a nervous smile playing at his lips. It was the first mention of marriage, even obliquely. The smile that spread across my face answered before my words could. That night, our midnight conversation shifted to someday dreams, my restaurant, Tyler's community-focused development projects, and the life we might build together. Fall arrived with crimson leaves and cooler nights on the rooftop. Our conversations turned increasingly to values and futures, as Tyler's relationship with his father deteriorated further. "I don't want his life," Tyler admitted one night as rain drummed against the metal roof above us. "All that money, all those connections, and he's alone in that big house with nothing but regrets for company." "What do you want?" I asked, watching raindrops trace patterns on his skin. His answer came without hesitation. A small house filled with laughter, work that matters, Sunday dinners with too many people around the table. He turned to face me fully. "You." His honesty emboldened me to share my own detailed vision, the restaurant I dreamed of running, our home above it, perhaps children who would grow up knowing the value of hard work and genuine connection. As the night stretched toward morning, we mapped out a shared future with surprising specificity, from the herb garden on our future patio to the community cooking classes I hope to offer. Tyler described architectural details for my restaurant while I named imaginary signature dishes. What had begun as daydreaming crystallized into something that felt remarkably like a plan. When morning came, Tyler looked at me with newfound determination. I'm going to tell him. Us, all of it. What I want, who I love, the future I'm choosing. The night before this planned confrontation, our rooftop conversation carried a different energy, nervous anticipation mixed with resolve. Rain threatened, keeping us inside at my kitchen table instead of our usual stargazing spot. What if he cuts me off completely? Tyler voiced his biggest fear, tracing condensation rings on the table. Then we start from exactly where we are, I said, reaching for his hand. You have your degree, your experience, contacts you've made yourself. We'll figure it out together. As we talked through possibilities until dawn, Tyler seemed to grow more certain with each passing hour. You know what's strange? He said as morning light filtered through my blinds. I've spent my whole life afraid of disappointing him, but now I'm more afraid of disappointing myself. And you. Before leaving that morning, Tyler held me longer than usual, his embrace containing something I couldn't quite name, determination mixed with apprehension. Whatever happens today, remember that every choice I make is because I want a life with you more than I want his approval, he whispered against my hair. I watched him drive away, the rising sun casting long shadows across the parking lot. His parting words had been different that morning. Not another day closer to forever, but something that felt oddly like goodbye. I couldn't have known then that it would be our last normal moment together for what would become the longest 2 years of my life. Tyler didn't call that night after meeting with his father, nor did he respond to my text asking how it went. By morning, anxiety had twisted my stomach into knots, but just as I was about to call his office, he appeared at my door with tired eyes and a grocery bag. I need to cook something, he said simply. Can I come in? In my kitchen, Tyler emptied the bag, fresh herbs, vegetables, and a bottle of wine. Without explaining what had happened with his father, he began methodically washing produce. I quietly joined him, handing him a cutting board. Whatever had transpired, he clearly needed this moment of normalcy. That evening became the foundation of what we'd later call our kitchen therapy. For weeks afterward, whenever work stress weighed on Tyler, he'd arrive at my apartment and head straight for the kitchen. The transformation was remarkable to witness. How his shoulders would gradually relax as he chopped vegetables. How the furrow between his brows would smooth as he stirred a simmering pot. This is the only place where results make sense, he explained one evening, kneading bread dough with surprising skill. You follow the steps, you get what you expect. Not like dealing with my father. My tiny kitchen became our sanctuary. In that small space, with barely room for 2 people to navigate, we developed an unspoken choreography. Tyler learned to anticipate. When I needed a whisk handed to me, I could sense when he needed space for a particularly precise cut. We moved around each other in a dance that felt intimate in ways beyond the physical. A trust and understanding that required no words. You're different here, I observed one night, watching him taste a sauce with careful consideration. Different how? He asked, adding a pinch more salt. More you, like you're not carrying someone else's expectations on your shoulders. His smile held a touch of sadness. That's exactly it. In this kitchen, I'm just Tyler, not Robert Mitchell's son. 3 months after we began dating, Tyler arrived with a determined expression and 3 large bags of groceries. What's all this? I asked as he unloaded ingredients onto my counter. Research and development for Ash's Corner, he announced, pulling out a notebook. We're hosting a pop-up restaurant tonight. We what? Panic flashed through me. Here? Tonight? Tyler's excitement was contagious. As he explained, he'd invited 3 of his friends and suggested I invite 3 of mine, a small test audience for my future restaurant's menu. Consider it market research. Before I could overthink it, Tyler was rearranging my furniture, transforming my modest living room into an intimate dining space. He'd borrowed proper tablecloths from somewhere, brought candles, and even printed simple menus listing the 4 courses we'd prepare. For 4 hours, we worked side by side, Tyler following my instructions with the focus he usually reserved for business proposals. When our guests arrived, he played the perfect host while I finalized each course in the kitchen. Between serving, I'd peek out to see him refilling glasses, engaging everyone in conversation, and subtly asking questions about their meal preferences. After everyone left, full and impressed, Tyler handed me a small notebook. Inside, he'd compiled detailed feedback from each guest, along with his own observations and suggestions. Partner was written across the top, underlined twice. Partner? I questioned, raising an eyebrow. In whatever capacity you'll have me, he replied, suddenly serious. I believe in you, Ash, in us. That night, over washing dishes, the name Ash's Corner was born. A neighborhood restaurant where food would create community. What had been my solitary dream now belonged to both of us, growing richer with Tyler's input and support. With Tyler's encouragement, I began seriously planning. We spent evenings at my kitchen table, creating business models and testing recipes, with Tyler contributing his business knowledge while respecting that the culinary vision was mine. He taught me about profit margins and overhead costs. I showed him how substituting one ingredient could transform both flavor profile and food costs. What about this location? He asked one evening, showing me a listing for a small storefront just outside downtown. The rent was reasonable, the location promising with good foot traffic. We could actually do this, Ash. Though we wasn't presumptuous, by then our futures had become intertwined in our minds. Tyler helped me draft a business plan, staying up late running numbers while I perfected signature dishes. He even suggested approaching his father's company for initial funding, assuring me that the business proposal was solid enough to stand on its merit. The following weekend, Tyler surprised me by taking me to see the storefront in person. Standing in the empty space with sunlight streaming through dusty windows, Tyler wrapped his arms around me from behind. Can you see it? He whispered, excitement vibrating through his voice. Tables there, kitchen through that doorway, herb garden in those windows. As he described the vision, I could see it too. Not just a restaurant, but our future taking physical shape. We spent hours in that empty space, measuring dimensions and planning layouts. Tyler sketched possibilities on a notepad, while I walked through imaginary dinner service routes, checking flow and efficiency. By the time we left, the vacant storefront had transformed in our minds, no longer empty but filled with potential and promise. What we didn't know as we locked up that afternoon was that one of Tyler's father's business associates had attended our pop-up dinner. The following Monday, Tyler received an unexpected summons to the Mitchell estate, the family home he rarely visited since his mother's passing. He knows about us, Tyler said when he called me that evening, his voice tightened. Not just that we're dating, but about the restaurant plans. Despite my protest that meeting his father could wait, Tyler insisted. I want him to see what I see, he said firmly. I'm done hiding parts of my life from him. That Friday evening found me changing outfits 4 times before Tyler picked me up. The Mitchell estate was everything I'd feared, imposing colonial architecture set back from the road, manicured gardens, and a circular driveway, where our arrival was noted by staff who appeared silently to park Tyler's car. Just breathe, Tyler murmured, squeezing my hand as we approached the massive front door. Remember, his opinion doesn't change anything between us. Robert Mitchell was tall like his son, but where Tyler's blue eyes held warmth, his father's were calculating ice. His handshake was perfectly calibrated, firm enough to demonstrate strength, brief enough to indicate I hadn't yet earned more of his time. So, you're the chef, he said, the slight emphasis making my profession sound like a curious hobby rather than a career. The dining room could have comfortably seated 20, yet the 3 of us sat at one end of a table long enough to host a corporate board meeting. Throughout dinner, Robert questioned my background, education, and ambitions, with the precision of a prosecutor building a case. Tyler's hand found mine under the table, squeezing reassuringly as his father's interrogation continued. And this restaurant concept, Robert said, swirling expensive wine in his glass. Tyler tells me you have quite specific ideas. We do, I replied, emphasizing the we deliberately. A neighborhood place, focused on seasonal ingredients and community gathering. Robert's slight grimace at neighborhood place spoke volumes about his vision for his son's future and how I didn't fit into it. Interesting, he said in a tone that suggested the opposite. And the financing for this venture? Before I could answer, Tyler interjected. Actually, Dad, that's something I wanted to discuss with you. I believe Mitchell Construction could benefit from diversifying into restaurant development. I've prepared some projections. I'm sure you have, Robert interrupted, his gaze never leaving my face. We'll discuss business another time, son. Tonight is about getting acquainted with Ashley. The rest of the evening proceeded with excruciating politeness on Robert's part and growing tension in Tyler's posture. As we prepared to leave, Robert pulled Tyler aside for what appeared to be a serious conversation, while I waited by the door, every instinct screaming to escape this beautiful cold house. In the car, Tyler was uncharacteristically silent, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Whatever his father had said in that private moment had shaken him. When I asked if he was okay, his response chilled me. He's given me a choice to make, Tyler said, staring straight ahead at the dark road. But what he doesn't understand is that I already made it the day I met you. The tension from that dinner at the Mitchell estate lingered between us for days. Tyler threw himself into work, coming home late and distracted. When I asked about his father's choice, he would smile tiredly and say, "Nothing for you to worry about." But the shadows under his eyes told a different story. 2 weeks after meeting his father, Tyler appeared at my door unannounced, hair disheveled and tie askew. Without explanation, he headed straight for my kitchen and began pulling ingredients from my cupboards. "I need to bake something," he muttered, measuring flour with unusual precision. I quietly joined him, falling into our familiar rhythm. We worked in silence, Tyler methodically following his mother's apple tart recipe from memory. As the tart baked, filling my apartment with cinnamon and warmth, some of the tension seemed to leave his shoulders. When the timer dinged, Tyler carefully removed the perfectly golden tart. Instead of cutting it immediately, he turned to me, flour dusting his black dress shirt and a smudge of cinnamon on his cheek. "My father gave me an ultimatum," he said finally. "End things with you, and receive my full inheritance and partnership in the company, or continue our relationship and be cut off completely." My heart plummeted. "Tyler, I gave him my answer this morning," he continued, reaching for my hands. Both of us were dusted with flour, creating tiny clouds as our fingers intertwined. "I told him I choose you. I'll always choose you." Before I could process his words, Tyler was kneeling on my kitchen floor, still holding my flour-covered hands in his. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box that looked worn around the edges. "This was my grandmother's," he said, opening it to reveal a vintage ring with a modest diamond surrounded by tiny sapphires. "Not as grand as my father would expect for a Mitchell wife, but it has history, love." The simplicity of the moment, Tyler kneeling in my tiny kitchen with flour on his cheek and vulnerability in his eyes, made my breath catch. "You're my home, Ash," he said simply. "Everything else is just details. Will you marry me?" The yes escaped my lips before I could overthink it. As he slid the ring onto my finger, leaving a trace of flour in its wake, I knew we were building something more meaningful than Robert Mitchell could ever understand. We celebrated that night with warm apple tart and cheap champagne, making plans that felt both terrifying and exhilarating now that Tyler's financial safety net had been removed. He would resign from Mitchell Construction the following day and begin applying to architectural firms that aligned with his community-focused values. I would continue saving for our restaurant. Together, we'd build our future brick by brick. What we didn't anticipate was Robert Mitchell's next move. 3 days after Tyler's resignation, he appeared at my restaurant during the lunch rush, commanding attention in his bespoke suit. My stomach dropped when the hostess pointed him toward the kitchen. "Miss Cooper," he said, his voice perfectly modulated despite our chaotic surroundings. "Might I have a moment of your time?" In the alley behind the restaurant, Robert Mitchell proposed a different kind of deal. He would fund our restaurant venture completely, prime location, top-of-the-line equipment, extensive marketing, on one condition: I would convince Tyler to return to the family business. "He has potential beyond these childish community projects," he said dismissively. "You clearly have influence over him. Use it wisely and everyone benefits." I declined immediately, anger burning through my veins at his attempt to manipulate us both. But as I returned to my shift, his parting words lingered uncomfortably. "He's a Mitchell. Eventually, he'll realize what he's giving up. Will your love be enough when that day comes?" The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of wedding planning alongside Tyler's job search. Each decision revealed the gap between our backgrounds. When I suggested a small ceremony at the local botanical gardens, Tyler agreed enthusiastically. But the next day, his father's secretary called with a detailed list of appropriate Mitchell wedding venues and a reminder that certain social obligations must be maintained. Despite Tyler's insistence that we ignore his father's interference, each discussion became a subtle battlefield. Our guest list grew from our original 50 friends to include business associates and family connections Tyler couldn't possibly exclude without causing irreparable damage. The simple dinner reception I envisioned transformed into a formal affair with seating charts that resembled diplomatic negotiations. "It's just easier this way," Tyler would say, rubbing his temples when I questioned these changes. "Trust me, standing up to my father is easier in theory than practice." Most concerning was Robert Mitchell's unexpected reversal regarding our restaurant. After I rejected his initial offer, he approached Tyler directly, offering to invest in Ash's corner as a wedding present. Despite my misgivings, Tyler saw it as his father's attempt at reconciliation. "He's trying, Ash," Tyler insisted, in his own way. 3 weeks before our wedding, I returned from a late shift to find Tyler at our kitchen table, staring at our venue contract, the distress on his face immediate and alarming. "What's wrong?" I asked, dropping my keys on the counter. "Dad's threatening to withdraw from our restaurant investment," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "Says he's reconsidered whether it's fiscally responsible to fund a first-time restaurateur." "Let him," I said firmly. "We'll find another way, other investors, a small business loan." "It's not just the restaurant," Tyler interrupted. "He's calling in favors around town. 2 firms canceled my interviews this week. He's making it clear that opposing him has consequences beyond just our inheritance." The worry remained in Tyler's eyes even as he tried to reassure me that everything would work out. It was a foreboding I chose to dismiss, focusing instead on our upcoming wedding and the life we were building together. A week later, our final wedding tasting at the bakery turned into an unexpected celebration. That morning, my doctor had confirmed what I'd suspected for days: I was pregnant. I waited until we were sampling cake flavors to share the news, watching Tyler's expression transform from confusion to wonder. "A baby?" he whispered, cake fork frozen in midair. "We're having a baby?" When I nodded, Tyler let out a whoop that startled the bakery staff. He lifted me off my feet, twirling me in a circle, his eyes shining with tears. For that perfect afternoon, all concerns about his father, the restaurant, and Tyler's uncertain career prospects faded away. We decided to keep our news private until after the ceremony, a precious secret between just us. A family of our own, Tyler kept murmuring, hand resting gently on my still flat stomach. Something entirely ours. 3 days before our wedding, during our rehearsal dinner at a small Italian restaurant, Tyler's phone rang. He checked the screen, frowned slightly, and excused himself to take the call outside. Through the window I watched his expression change, his posture stiffening as he paced the sidewalk. When he returned 20 minutes later, his face was pale, his smile forced. "Everything okay?" I asked quietly as he slid back into his seat beside me. "Just business," he claimed, but his hand trembled against mine under the table. "Nothing that can't wait until after the honeymoon." That night, Tyler held me longer than usual before we fell asleep, his arms wrapped around me protectively, his breathing uneven against my neck. When I woke the next morning, his side of the bed was empty. His phone went straight to voicemail. By noon, when he missed our final venue walkthrough, I knew something was terribly wrong. My fiancé had vanished without a trace 3 days before I was supposed to become his wife. The first 24 hours of Tyler's disappearance, I convinced myself there was a reasonable explanation. Car trouble, phone died, family emergency. I left 17 voicemails, each progressively less composed than the last. By the second day, denial gave way to raw panic. I drove to his apartment with the spare key he'd given me months earlier, heart pounding against my ribs as I turned the lock. The space was eerily undisturbed, bed made, coffee cup rinsed in the sink, his laptop missing but everything else in place. No note, no clue, just emptiness where answers should be. "Maybe you got cold feet," my friend Zoe suggested gently when she came over that night, finding me surrounded by wedding RSVPs and unanswered texts to Tyler. I shook my head vehemently. Not Tyler. Not the man who held me each night with such tenderness, who talked about our baby with wonder in his eyes. Whatever had happened wasn't by choice. I clung to this belief like a life raft in rising waters. The third day, what would have been our wedding eve, I drove to Mitchell Construction, desperation overriding dignity. The receptionist's expression shifted from professional courtesy to practiced sympathy when I gave my name. "I'm sorry, Miss Cooper, Mr. Mitchell isn't available." "Which Mr. Mitchell?" I pressed, hands gripping my purse strap. "Tyler or Robert?" "Neither is available to visitors today," she replied, not meeting my eyes, especially without an appointment. When I refused to leave, security was called. As a uniformed guard escorted me to the parking lot, I caught sight of Robert Mitchell watching from an upper window, his expression unreadable behind reflective glass. My wedding day dawned with cruel perfection. Sunlight streaming through windows, birds singing in the oak outside my apartment. Instead of walking down an aisle, I sat on my bathroom floor, staring at the diamond and sapphire ring that felt suddenly heavy on my finger. Friends called with gentle concern. I let their messages accumulate, unanswered. 3 days after our scheduled wedding, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I answered with embarrassing eagerness. "Ashley Cooper?" a woman's voice inquired. "Yes, is this about Tyler?" I clutched the phone tighter. "This is Dr. Marshall's office, confirming your prenatal appointment tomorrow at 9. My throat tightened. I'd forgotten completely. The following morning, lying on an examination table as a technician prepared the ultrasound, the reality of my situation hit with fresh force. This child, our child, might come into the world without ever knowing their father. The thought brought tears that I blamed on hormones when the technician noticed. "First baby?" she asked kindly. I nodded, unable to explain that my tears weren't just for this moment but for all the moments Tyler should have been experiencing alongside me. Then I heard it, a rapid underwater whooshing sound filling the room, my baby's heartbeat strong, determined, undeniably real. In that moment, something shifted inside me. This child deserved better than a mother drowning in abandonment. They deserved someone who fought back. I left the doctor's office with a grainy ultrasound photo and newfound resolve. That afternoon, I called Robert Mitchell's office every 30 minutes until his assistant finally connected us. "Miss Cooper?" his voice came through, perfectly controlled. "This persistence is unnecessary." "Where is he?" I demanded, skipping preamble. "My son has made certain choices. I suggest you respect them. I want to hear that from him," I countered, "not from you." A heavy pause followed. "Perhaps we should meet. My office, tomorrow, 3 o'clock. The Mitchell Construction headquarters was all glass and steel, reflecting sunlight with blinding intensity. Robert Mitchell's corner office showcased panoramic city views, the walls adorned with architectural awards and project photos. He didn't stand when I entered, merely gestured to the chair opposite his immaculate desk. "You look well," he observed, eyes flickering briefly to my midsection. "Where is Tyler?" Robert's expression remained impassive. "He's made his choice," he stated coldly, opening a drawer and sliding a check across his desk. "This should cover any inconvenience." I glanced at the check, an obscene amount with settlement written in the memo line, before tearing it neatly in half. "Is he safe?" I asked, voice breaking despite my determination to remain composed. Something flickered across Robert's face, not quite sympathy, but recognition of my distress. "He's where he belongs," was his only answer. "This unfortunate chapter is closed, Miss Cooper. I suggest you move forward accordingly." As security appeared to escort me out, I placed the torn check and my engagement ring on his desk. "Tell Tyler his child deserves better than both of you." The subsequent weeks passed in a blur of nausea, sleeplessness, and grief. Friends handled wedding cancellations while I moved mechanically through my days, working double shifts to save money and stay occupied. Without Tyler's income, the restaurant dream seemed impossible, but I found myself unable to relinquish them entirely. 4 months after Tyler's disappearance, I noticed a familiar storefront with a for lease sign while driving home from work, the same space we'd once walked through together, planning our future. On impulse, I called the number, The rent had dropped significantly. The area had seen several businesses close recently. That night, staring at my mother's recipe box and the business plan Tyler and I had created, I made a decision. The following morning, I took my engagement ring to a jeweler for appraisal. It wasn't worth as much as I'd hoped, but combined with my savings and a small business loan, it might be enough for a modest start. At 6 months pregnant, I signed the lease for what would become Ash's Corner. Friends thought I was crazy, opening a restaurant alone while preparing for single motherhood. Maybe I was. But converting that empty space into something real gave purpose to days that might otherwise have collapsed under grief's weight. I painted walls between doctor's appointments, installed secondhand equipment while my daughter kicked inside me, and tested menu items on construction workers finishing the interior. My growing belly became part of my identity as I navigated food suppliers and permit offices, a visible reminder that I was building for two. The restaurant's opening night coincided with my 8th month of pregnancy. My doctor had urged me to postpone, concerned about the stress, but waiting wasn't an option. The small space filled quickly with friends, former CEO workers, and curious locals drawn by our opening specials. Standing at the entrance in a specially made chef's coat that accommodated my rounded belly, I greeted each guest with practiced warmth. Behind my smile lurked persistent thoughts of Tyler, wondering if he somehow knew what I'd accomplished, if he would ever meet the daughter who now responded to my voice with enthusiastic movement. Midway through the evening, an elderly couple complimented the simple apple tart on our dessert menu. "Family recipe?" the woman asked. I touched my stomach reflexively. "Yes," I answered, thinking of the handwritten card in Tyler's mother's recipe box, from her grandmother. As the night progressed successfully, I felt both broken and stronger than I'd ever been. My daughter kicked vigorously during a particularly busy moment, as if sensing my determination to build a life worthy of her. What I couldn't know then was that exactly 2 years later, I would look up from the same host stand, to see Tyler Mitchell walking through the door, his blue eyes finding mine across the crowded restaurant, unaware that his greatest regret sat coloring in a booster seat at table 7. 2 years had passed since that opening night. Ash's Corner had grown from a desperate gamble into a thriving neighborhood fixture. Regular customers knew my daughter, Lily, now a curious toddler with her father's blue eyes and dimpled smile. She spent afternoons coloring at the corner table while I managed the dinner rush, occasionally charming customers with her precocious comments and infectious laughs. That Tuesday evening began like any other. April rain tapped against the windows as the dinner crowd filled our tables. I was at the host stand reviewing reservations, when the door opened, bringing a gust of cool air and the man who had haunted my dreams for 2 years. Tyler Mitchell stood just inside the entrance, rain darkening his shoulders, his eyes scanning the room before landing on me. 2 years had changed him. A few strands of silver now threaded through his dark hair, new lines around his eyes, but the dimple that appeared with his hesitant smile remained exactly as I remembered. Time seemed to freeze as we stared at each other, the restaurant noise fading to background static. My clipboard clattered to the floor, breaking the spell. "Ashley," he said, my name on his lips sending an unwelcome shiver down my spine. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. 1,000 questions fought to escape, tangled with 2 years of anger and grief. Tyler took a step forward, his gaze sweeping over the bustling restaurant. "You did it," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. "It's exactly how we planned." His use of "we" ignited something inside me. "What are you doing here?" I finally managed, my voice barely audible over the dining room chatter. "I had to see you," he replied, as if his appearance after 2 years of silence was the most natural thing in the world. His eyes continued roaming the space, taking in the herb garden in the windows, the community table we'd once sketched on napkins. "Moved on fast, huh?" he remarked with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. The casual cruelty of his comment, as if I'd simply forgotten him rather than rebuilt my life from the wreckage he'd left, struck me like a physical blow. Before I could respond, a small voice called from behind me. "Mommy, look! I drew a butterfly." Lily stood there in her tiny apron that matched mine, holding up her latest masterpiece. I watched Tyler's expression transform as he registered the child's existence, his eyes darting between us, noting her dark hair and familiar blue eyes. His smirk vanished, replaced by confusion that bordered on disbelief. The moment stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths. I placed my hand protectively on Lily's shoulder. "This is my daughter, Lily," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Then, meeting his gaze directly, I added, "She's yours." Tyler's face drained of color. He staggered slightly, reaching for the host stand to steady himself. "That's," he began, then stopped, mathematical realization dawning in his eyes. "How old is she?" 22 months, I answered. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing as regret flooded his eyes. Regret for more than just leaving me, but for the child he'd never known existed. "Can we talk?" he whispered, voice cracking. "Please." After getting Lily settled with my assistant manager, I led Tyler to the small office at the back of the restaurant. The space was barely large enough for the desk and 2 chairs, forcing an intimacy I wasn't prepared for. "Where have you been?" I asked, the question that had circled my mind for 730 days, finally spoken aloud. Tyler rubbed his hands over his face. "In Singapore, then London. Dad's international projects." He looked up, eyes pleading for understanding. "She called that night, said he'd destroy everything you were building if I didn't leave immediately. Said he had enough influence to ensure you'd never get a business loan, never lease a commercial space in this city. So you just disappeared? Without a word?" My voice rose despite my efforts to contain it. "And she was monitoring my phone, my email. I thought I was protecting you, protecting your dream." Tyler's voice broke. He promised if I fulfilled the 2-year contract with our international partners, he'd leave you alone, let you build your restaurant without interference. And our child? Were you protecting her too by disappearing? Pain flashed across his face. I didn't know, he whispered. God, Ashley, I swear I didn't know. Would it have mattered? I asked, the question that had haunted me since the first flutter of movement in my womb. Tyler's eyes filled with tears. It would have changed everything. The restaurant noise filtered through the thin door, clinking plates, muffled laughter, the life I'd built without him. Why now, I asked. Why come back after exactly 2 years? The contract ended. First plane home, his eyes held mine. I never stopped loving you, Ash, not for a single day. Those words, once all I'd wanted to hear, now rang hollow against the reality of raising our daughter alone, of birthing her without his hand to hold, of explaining to a confused toddler why other children had daddies but she didn't. Love isn't a feeling, Tyler. It's a choice. A daily decision to stay, to fight, to put someone else before yourself. I stood, smoothing my apron. You chose your father's approval over our family. That's a choice you'll have to live with. Please, he begged, reaching for my hand. Let me meet her properly. Let me be her father. Biology makes you her father, I replied, gently removing my hand from his. Being her daddy, that's something you'll have to earn, one day at a time. Back in the dining room, Lily's laughter rang out as she showed a customer her butterfly drawing. Tyler stood in the office doorway, watching her with wonder and devastation etched across his features, seeing for the first time the daughter who had his eyes, his dimple, his artistic tendencies. She likes apple tart, I offered quietly, just like her grandmother did. Tyler nodded, unable to speak as tears spilled down his cheeks. In that moment, watching him stare at the child he'd never known, I felt no triumph in his pain, no satisfaction in his regret, only sadness for what might have been, for the moments none of us would ever get back. You can come Thursday afternoon, I said finally. She'll be here, coloring while I prep for dinner service. Hope flickered across his face. Thank you. As he turned to leave, pausing for one last look at his daughter, I wondered if I'd made the right choice. Was I protecting Lily by keeping her father at arm's length or denying her something essential? The question had no easy answer. What I knew with certainty was this. The man walking out my door was not the same one who had disappeared 2 years ago. That Tyler had chosen fear over love, security over family. This one carried the weight of consequence in his shoulders, the heavy knowledge of what his absence had cost not just himself, but the daughter who had never known his embrace. Whether redemption was possible remained to be seen. But as I watched him step back into the April rain, I recognized that some choices can never be unmade, some moments never recaptured. We could build something new from here, a different kind of family perhaps, but the future Tyler had thrown away that night would remain forever beyond reach, existing only in the world of might-have-beens. As Lily ran toward me with another drawing, her smile bright enough to chase away lingering shadows, I knew that despite everything, I wouldn't change a thing. The path that had broken my heart had also given me the strength to create something beautiful, both the thriving restaurant around me and the extraordinary little girl now tugging at my apron. Did I do right? I sometimes wonder, watching Tyler slowly build a relationship with our daughter through Thursday afternoon visits and tentative weekend outings. The answer changes with each passing day. But when I see Lily's eyes light up at the sight of her father, I know that opening that door was necessary. Not for Tyler's redemption, but for her chance to know the other half of herself. Sometimes, the hardest choices are the ones where there is no right answer, only the next step forward, taken in love, in hope, in the shadow of regret.